נצר לשון חמרה ושפתיך מדבר מרמה צור מרסתו רק שלום ורוד והוא
Professor Richard Schwartz, happy birthday. I am so grateful to you, what you have done for the Jewish vegan movement, the Jewish vegetarian movement, for animal rights and animal welfare all around the world. You've been an inspiration to me and so many others. May you have many more decades of good health and strength and success in your advocacy and teaching, and joy in knowing how much you've moved this movement forward. Thank you from me, from Shemayim, the Jewish Animal Advocacy Network, from all Jewish vegans, and from the animals around the world. Happy birthday, enjoy, and good health and blessings.
Hi, Richard. I'm Louis Regenstein in Atlanta, writer and author, and I am so honored to be asked to join in wishing you a happy 90th birthday. And Richard, I'd like to say with all sincerity, you don't look a day over 85. Richard, seriously, your legacy of greatness is already well established. You are well known as the world's top expert and the biggest promoter of the Bible's and Judaism's teachings on protecting animals and nature, and spreading these teachings far and wide and all over the world. I am proud and grateful to have worked with you for over half a century, and for all I've learned from you and the wonderful material you have written that I was able to borrow for my own writings. I hope always with credit. Every time there is a Jewish holiday, and they seem to come around every week or so, we can expect to see an email and various articles from you on how this holiday teaches and requires us to be kind to animals. Richard, you will go down in history alongside such great Jewish teachers and rabbis as Solomon, Rashi, and Maimonides. I mean that. Thank you, Richard, for your friendship, your dedication, and for devoting your entire life to such a wonderful cause.
Okay, so now I'm honored to invite Rabbi Adam Frank to.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with you, Richard. I want to say a couple of words personally and then do a quick teaching in your honor. In 2023, my wife and I were in New York City. She was finishing her master's degree in social work at Yeshiva University, and I was bored in the city. But I heard there was an animal welfare or animal rights conference happening in Washington, D.C. So I took the train down, and there were 500 or 600 people there, and there were two other kippah wearers. One was a boy, maybe 15 years old, and then another one was a man who was walking around saying hi to everybody. Everybody was stopping and saying hi to him, and I had to find out who it was. And Richard, it was you, of course. That was the first time I ever got exposed to many of the teachings that you've been preaching for years. I learned about the realities of the animals in the industry. I learned about the realities of the environment as a result of that industry. I learned about your papers, your books, and you had such a warmth to you, such a spirit, and such an infectious personality, such a desire to spread the good news, as our Southern Baptist friends would say. But Richard, in that moment, I felt like I had found somebody who I could bond to, as somebody who was a fellow. I don't know your level of observance, you know my level of observance. I know that we both publicly wanted to express ourselves as Jews in the world and take on this issue. And in fact, that was the date, it was at that conference that was the last time I ate any animal products. And you were part of that influence. I also know we also have a connection to Atlanta. Your brother, Stan, is it Stan?
Yeah.
Stan, and what's his wife's name?
Sheila.
Stan and Sheila, right, thank you. Are you Mrs. Richard Schwartz?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, pleasure.
Thanks.
Anyway, so Richard, I always felt a very strong connection to you, and throughout the years, you have been incredibly generous whenever I needed some sources, whenever you always turned to me and asked me to do things as your partner, and it was always a great compliment. And I'd like to do a teaching for Richard, but instead of passing out, I brought some source sheets. I printed them out on recycled paper for certain, but I don't think it's necessary to pass them out. But I brought four sources that I believe, when I learn these sources, I think of you. The first source is Ibn Ezra. He teaches about Tehillim. There's a verse that says, "Hashamayim shamayim ladonai, ha'aretz natan libnei adam." That's very appropriate for today, Rosh Chodesh. And that's part of the Hallel service. Hashamayim shamayim ladonai, ha'aretz natan libnei adam. Right? And the teaching is that the unintelligent person will think that God placed Adam and Eve on this earth to be the God of the earth. God was in the heavens, Hashamayim Shamayim Adonai, the Haaretz Natan Libnei Adam, and God gave the earth to humans. But Ibn Ezra says that is incorrect. As in, God placed us here to be stewards. That's a word I learned from you, Richard. That we are here to steward God's creation, and we have to steward it responsibly, or else we lose the right to be stewards. And so the earth is our domain to work for God, to steward and protect. The second source I think about is from the Rambam, but also the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and it says that we must keep our bodies healthy and clean and doing good, because when we're sick, we cannot know God. We cannot understand God. And one of the reasons why, and so, Richard, part of your teaching is human health requires us to avoid products that are injurious to us. So the second element I'm speaking of is you cared about the environment, you cared about human health. The third source I want to speak about comes from the Talmud Bavli, and it says, "Kol mi she'efshar limchot la'anshei beito v'lo micha nitfas al anshei beito, v'anshei iro nitfas al anshei iro, v'chol ha'olam kulo nitfas al kol ha'olam kulo." Anybody who has the ability to protest to the members of his household who are doing wrong and doesn't protest, he carries the burden of the transgression of the house. Same thing within his city. If it's happening in the city and he doesn't speak up, and if it happens in the world and he doesn't speak up. And Richard, nobody can accuse you of being silent. Nobody can accuse you of being lazy. You're the epitome of, I can't complete the work, but I'm not free to desist. And finally, the epitome of Richard Schwartz in my eyes comes from a source in your book. I believe it's Judaism and Global Survival. I think it's this because I've come to you and I've said, where's the source? And you said, Adam, I heard the Midrash. I can't find the source myself, but it's a source I use all the time. There's a man standing outside of Sodom and Gomorrah and screaming, repent, do tshuva, change your ways. Rabbi Yonatan, good to see you. Change your ways. 20 years later, he's still out there screaming and yelling and saying the same thing. Somebody comes up to him and says, what the hell are you doing? And he says, well, 20 years ago, I was yelling at them to change who they are. Now I continue yelling so they don't change who I am. Richard, the difference is though that you have influenced people and you're not going to go quietly. And you continue to grow too, because when I first met you, you were vegetarian, right? And we used to hear the Fruit of the Loom comment, right? You can't think about Richard without hearing about the freedom. He's so dedicated to vegetarianism, he's even wearing Fruit of the Loom, right? You can't, Richard. That's going to be your epitaph. Well, Richard, thank you for the contribution that you've made to the Jewish world, to the world, larger world, and me personally for being a role model, for being a great source of inspiration and wisdom.
Our next speaker, I'm honored to invite Rabbi David Rubin.
Thank you.
I'm not doing introductions today.
Standing or sitting?
Probably people know you and your.
They don't need to. My words are what I hope are valued rather than. So may I sit? Is that all right, or would you prefer me to stand? Sit. So I would like to echo the beautiful words of Rabbi Adam Frank, say how much it is a privilege and a joy to be able to be here at this event and to pay tribute to Richard, who in many ways, if you like, our father figure, our mentor, Chalutz Lifnei HaMachaneh, the pioneer in many different ways. And it's wonderful that we're doing this on this day. I don't know whether Yossi realized the significance of this day, but it's an amazingly appropriate, serendipitous or providential date to be able. It's Rosh Chodesh Nisan, or at least we're now at the conclusion of Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Nisan is, first of all, Rosh Chodesh Nisan is when the Mishkan, the sanctuary, was set up. So it's a day of dedication, and therefore dedication to the highest values, the highest spiritual values. And we believe that veganism is articulating the highest spiritual values and ethical values of Judaism. But it's also the day on which some of us had the first opportunity to make a bracha. The bracha that you make on Rosh Chodesh Nisan on flowering trees that produce fruit. To be able to give thanks for the beauty and the glory and the provision of creation and give thanks to God for that. And therefore, that's what we celebrate. One of our fundamental messages is that if you really love God, then you must love God's creation. And if you don't really love the creation and care about the creation, then you're not really properly loving God. So that's a very important message for this day, and a message that you've carried so beautifully. And of course, this is the beginning of the month of redemption, of Geula, the month of Geula, month of redemption, when of course we pray that we be redeemed from much of the sorrow that's afflicted us in recent times, but where we look for redemption for the whole of humanity. And we believe that redemption, a redeemed humanity, must perforce be a humanity of compassion and care for all people and all living things. And that has its imperatives in terms of the lifestyle that we lead and the diet that we lead. This month of Geula, of course, is the month of renewal associated with the beginning of our history. the beginning of the history of the Jewish people, as we now are on 2 weeks away from Pesach, this coming. And of course, the hero of Pesach is the Almighty. But the central character, who fortunately Rabbi Frank didn't mention, he mentioned lots of other people who are associated with you, but for me, I think that there's a wonderful parallel between you and Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have your fluency and wasn't as articulate as you. You don't need a brother to be able, I don't know what standing and flanter is like, but at any rate, you don't need a brother to be able to put over your case very fluently. But what do I mean by that? So let's look at the passage that introduces Moshe Rabbeinu to us with Parshat Shemot. We have, as we all know, he's delivered from the genocide that is taking place by Pharaoh, and he's reared in the palace, and he is separate from the rest of the people. And then we hear, interestingly, a next section of the Sedra of Shemot starts with a second heading. There is Vayigdal HaYeled, a section that starts off that tells of how the child was reared and taken to the palace, and then it's Vayigdal Moshe. Now Moshe becomes Moshe, that's not just a Yeled. And what then are we told under that heading, Vayigdal Moshe? We are told a series of stories. One is the story of how he goes out and he sees his brethren, whom he has been somewhat distanced from, being persecuted and being beaten. And his sense of solidarity with his people is roused and he takes action. Then we're told of a story of how he goes out and he sees two Jews arguing one against one another. And he's very distressed by this, and he tries to take action to be able to promote peaceful relations within his own particular community. So it's not purely, or if you like, a reaction against anti-Semitism. It's now the desire to have a constructive community internally. Then we get to the next story. He's fled and he's come to the well in Midian, and there he encounters the daughters of Jethro. And he is concerned that they are not being able to tend their flocks. Interestingly, whether he's concerned primarily for the daughters or whether he's concerned for the flocks is not clear, but it's clear that he's concerned for something beyond his own people and for people who are not yet his own people. So his concerns have already expanded universally. So you see the growth from the very particular to the more national responsibility to the international global responsibility. That's very clear in the Sedra. But there's a wonderful midrash, because the next story goes on to the burning bush. And Moshe is described as being Achar Hamidbar, on the other side of the desert. And our sages in the midrash ask, what's he doing so far away from home? And they're saying Moshe was a shepherd because it said he was tending Yitro, his father-in-law's flocks. And he looked around and he noticed that there was a lamb missing. And he went looking for it. And it took him a journey right to the other side of the desert. And where he found this little lamb that had managed to get to an oasis and had found some water and was slaking its thirst. And Moshe says, oh, little lamb, I didn't realize that you were so thirsty and that's why you ran away. And now you must be tired. And he lifted this little lamb up on his shoulders and carried it back. And a heavenly voice came out and said, one who cares for the littlest of the flock, this is the one who will care for my flock, for my people. So you see that with this midrash expands it further. He goes from the reaction, if you like, to threat, to antagonism, to violence, to the sense of community solidarity, to an international sense of responsibility for non-Jews as well as Jews, and ultimately for all living creatures. And I think that really reflects your approach, Richard. You are a proud Jew, cares deeply about your own Jewishness. You obviously want to protect us against all things that threaten us and some things that people don't realize threaten us. And you want to be able to promote the well-being amongst the Jewish people as a whole. But you are not an ethnocentric, narrow-minded Jew, as unfortunately there are too many of us. You have a true sense of humanity and of human responsibility and compassion and care for all people. But it doesn't stay at all people. And this is your great strength, that your care and love of all creatures, and not of all sentient beings, but of the whole natural world, is part of who you are and what you embody and symbolize and inspire, and we pray will inspire very many more. But let me now add some words with regards, therefore, to that Chag that is the central focus of the events we're talking about, the lead up to it, the festival of redemption of Pesach. Pesach, of course, is the celebration, not simply of the redemption of the Jewish people from slavery, but the triumph of that redemption of human freedom from slavery. Pesach teaches that no human being should be enslaved by another, that we must all be free to fulfill our human potential. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch has a very beautiful idea, and that is that no human being is without any kind of dominant impulse. In a sense, we are all serving something. The question is, what are you serving? For some people, the most important thing in their lives are their own self-indulgence. Some people, it's accumulating money. You cannot be anything greater than your dominant impulse. The higher your impulse is, the more you ascend in terms of your aspirations, the greater the possibility for your freedom. And that is, of course, the Jewish religious understanding. It's not just shlachet ami v'yavduni, because when God is the object of our aspirations, we are serving the highest and therefore the greatest potential of fulfillment. And therefore, from Pesach, Judaism as a whole is one long tirade against slavery and for freedom. But here's the rub, and the question that surely you will be thinking. If Judaism is so opposed to slavery, and if Pesach celebrates liberation and human freedom, how come slavery is legislated for in the Torah? And the answer, of course, is that the Torah is given, as our sages tell us, to human beings and not to angels. And it's given in a context. And it's given in a situation which takes into account how civilization is functioning at a given time. And you can see that the Torah does not encourage slavery by the very fact that it requires people, if they do enter, and remember, slavery was an institution that was not like we think of it today. It's not, God forbid, like the kind of trafficking and slavery that persists in our world today. We often think we're an enlightened society, and we have terrible things going on, and not least of all, the trafficking in human beings. But slavery, as defined in the Torah, was a situation where one of two contexts. One was that you'd fallen upon hard times and you weren't able to provide for your family or even for yourself, and you sold yourself into the employ of another person. The other situation was if you committed a crime and you could not today, like in most of our world, where if somebody's stolen, they throw him into jail, doesn't do any good for the person he's stolen from, doesn't do any good to the person who stole. What's achieved by throwing somebody into jail? At least in Judaism, you had to make amends and you had to compensate, pay back the person you had stolen from. But if you were not able to pay it back, or especially if something had happened and therefore you had a fine on which increased the amount that you had to pay, then you could serve in somebody else's, therefore, service, and you could therefore pay off your debt. Now, this situation could be very cushy. And in fact, the demands upon a Hebrew slave within the community were so great that the Talmud in Tractate Kiddushin says, he who acquires a Hebrew slave acquires a master over himself because the demands are so great. And a person might want to remain in that situation, but the Torah says no. On the 7th year, you can send your services, or your services can be demanded of you for 7 years. But in that 7 years, you've got to go out. No, okay, you don't want to go out? You're happy, you're content, as the Torah says. Got a wonderful wife, I've got a home, I've got a great setup, I'm okay. Then the master has to take you, your employer, and he bears a hole in your ear against the doorpost, the mezuzah. Why? And essentially, that's, if you like, a sign of a negative sign. And our sages ask in two different places. They ask, why is it the ear of all limbs in the body that has to have the orb, that has to have itself pierced. And why is it the mezuzah, the post of the house, that has to be the place where this is done? They say, because the ear that heard God say, unto me the children of Israel are my servants, and not the servants of servants, let this ear bear testimony that this man voluntarily gave up his freedom. And let the doorpost bear witness, the doorpost when I passed over in order to bring about the freedom of the children of Israel, let that doorpost bear witness that this man has voluntarily relinquished it. So he can do it, but it's clear the Torah does not think very highly of it, because the Torah wants people to be free. So what we have here is an example of where the Torah makes a clear concession for a societal norm and certain needs, but it's not the ideal. And it's continuously reminding us that it's not the ideal. The interesting thing is Rabbi Yosef Albo in the Sefer Ikarim, he equates, he mentions this particular principle in relation to the Eshet Yifat Torah. The Torah legislates in a situation of war, it's possible to be able to take a beautiful woman from the enemy that you have now conquered. Our sages say that this legislation is against the Yetzer Hara. In other words, it recognizes in times of war, human passions get really high, and you have to take that into account. But there's all kind of legislation to be able to ensure that this woman will be protected, even attempts at the beginning to try to make her less attractive so that this man's impulses are in some way assuaged. And it's clear, very clear, that the Torah does not consider this to be an ideal. It's a concession. And Rabbi Yosef Albo in Sefer Ikarim makes that particularly clear, that it's a concession. And similarly, this is a situation with regard to meat eating. It's clear in the Torah that the ideal, as Richard has written so many times, and as so many of us have preached frequently, the ideal, as evidenced in the Garden of Eden and the Messianic age, is a world in which of a plant-based diet. It's clear that the concession to meat eating was given after the flood. It's also clear that the Torah is trying to find ways of curbing us away from meat eating. The language it uses, concessionary language. And our sages themselves also say, in relation to shechita, does God care about what kind of knife you slaughter the animal with? But the mitzvot were given in order to refine the human spirit. In other words, these actions are designed to ennoble us, and therefore to move us away as much as possible from eating in that particular direction. And so these, especially at this time when we are celebrating redemption, as I was able to say to Michael recently in an interview, we have to think of all forms of redemption. And we have to think of all kinds of slavery and affliction in our world. And one of the greatest sources of slavery that is causing human disease because of the way we have approached it, but is also causing enormous destruction of our environment. A major source of destruction of our environment is the consumption of animal products. That is a form of human enslavement. It is certainly a condition from which we need to be redeemed. So Pesach is the time when we need, therefore, to articulate, to express redemption from all forms of slavery, and from all forms of oppression, and from all forms of corruption that corrupt the human being, the human spirit, the human body, our society, our cosmos, our world. And therefore it's a time especially for the celebration of the ideals that we share, and a time to pay tribute to Richard. I will conclude with one last comment. You will all be familiar with the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, the 5th Perek, 21st Mishnah, which talks about certain things associated with ages. And people will know about the age of mightiness, the age of wisdom, etc. 90 years has an interesting word associated with it. Tishim Shana, now it could be Lashuach or it could be Lasuach. That depends upon how you read it. I prefer Lasuach. And Lasuach obviously comes from the root of Sicha, of conversation. It means that 90 years old, if you've managed to get to that wonderful age, you have a perspective that is really unique. And people should listen to you. They should listen to your sikha. They should listen to your experience. They should be able to benefit from your vision, your retrospect, the lessons you've learned, all these things. But generally, the assumption is that at 90 years old, that's basically all you're doing. You're reflecting. Of course, people can benefit from it, but that's basically all you're doing at 90 years old. Richard is an example that absolutely defeats the rule and shows that you could be at 90 and not only have wonderful wisdom of a historical retrospect, but still be active and dynamic and inspirational. And as Adam said, we hope you will continue to do this for many decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaker, I have some technical Professor Shemesh. I'll see if we can. לפתור לי את הבעיה הזאת. אוקיי. רק רגע, אבל תציג את זה. כן, גם את זה.
גם את זה?
אני מראש מתנצלת שאני אקריא, ושפת האם שלי היא עברית, אז אני לא אהיה רהוטה כמו קודמיי, אבל...
It's the content that matters. My late father was actually a great orator, but he used to say that oratory is the harlot of the arts. It's the most unreliable of arts, because that's typified by demagogues who get away if they can articulate. So you've always got to look at the content. Harlot. H-A-R-L-O-T.
Yeah.
Yes, I can see her levels to the screen.
כן, כן. לראות... זה לא זז. כן. אוקיי, בסדר, תודה. Okay, good evening everyone, and as the former speakers, I'm excited to be here in honor of Professor Richard Schwartz, who made and continues to make such a significant contribution to the idea of veganism or vegan Judaism. 10 years ago, I had the privilege to come to this center to congratulate Richard on his 8th birthday, and I'm happy to say that Richard is like a good wine that only gets better over the years. Since then, he has published his book, Vegan Revolution, and countless articles and the letters to the newspapers regarding vegan Judaism from every possible angle. The subject of my talk is the complex attitudes towards animals in the Bible. I will start with the 3 chapters of Genesis, which are a microcosmos of the Bible's attitude towards animals. And I will present, afterwards, I will present a panoramic presentation of positive points, now only positive, regarding the attitudes toward animals in the entire Bible. Well, already in Genesis 1, we meet the animals and are informed about the connection between them and God. The following positive data emerges from this chapter regarding animals. Animals are God's creatures. Second, the animals in the sea and in the sky receive a blessing from God. Third, God expresses his satisfaction with the creation of the animals, and God saw that it was good. Fourth, animals are called a living soul, nefesh chaya, similarly to humans, but unlike the plants which have no soul. Fifth, the animals on land and the first man were created on the same day, on the sixth day of creation, which actually indicates the closeness between them. What a blow to the human ego. On the other hand, from the first creation story, it is clear that humans who were created last enjoy a special status compared to other animals. First, only they were created in the image of God. Second, the creation of the first humans is described in a solemn and poetic style. Third, God speaks to them directly. Fourth, God grants them rule over the animals. The last point creates a likeness between humans and God. Just as God rules over humans and all creatures, of course, so humans rule over the animals. From Genesis 2, it appears that the animals were created for the purpose of the man, to redeem him from his loneliness. This is the picture that emerges from the order of the scriptures. After God recognizes that it is not good that a man should be alone, and therefore decided, I will make him a helper fit for him, one could expect a description of the creation of the woman. But instead, immediately afterwards, the creation of animals and the interaction between them and the man at the initiative of God is surprisingly narrated. Quote, now out of the ground, the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all livestock and to every beast of the field. But for Adam, there was not found a helper fit for him. The impression emerging from this description is that the animals were created in order to alleviate the man's loneliness by creating a helper fit for him, Ezer Kenegdo. The attempt to find a helper for the man among the animals failed. Nevertheless, the first interaction that the man created is with the animals. He gave them names. This action, as many have noticed, establishes his rule over them, but it might also express intimacy and closeness, because giving someone a name requires acquaintance with his nature. Let's move on to Genesis 3, to the fateful encounter between the serpent and the woman. It is worth noting that the first dialogue in the Bible takes place between a human being, Eve, and an animal, the serpent, and it was initiated by the serpent. Some suggest that the serpent represents Eve's inner voice. Even if we accept this suggestion, the possibility of animals representing the inner voice of a human being indicates that there are close affinities between animals and humans. The punishment for the human sin that was provoked by the serpent includes corruption of the relationship between men and women, as well as of the relationship between the human race and the animals. quote, I will put enmity between you and the woman and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel. It is interesting, however, that there is the mention of equality to this hostile relationship. The two sides will both hurt each other and be hurt by each other. It should be noted that in the harmonious description of the apocalyptic vision, in the prophecy of Isaiah in chapter 11, the relationship between the human race and the animals will be restored, as is clear from the following pastoral description, which not accidentally mentions serpents. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. With the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden, it is by this harmony created in human-animal relationships. Using animal skins may be between a vegetarian diet in the Garden of Eden and the permission that God gave the humankind to eat animals after the flood. To conclude the first part of this talk, the complex relationship to animals in the Bible is already revealed in the story of Eden. On the one hand, there are positive elements related to the relationship and humans. There is a closeness between them and the human race. But on the other hand, they are described as inferior to the human race. The story of the first sin begins with the intimacy between the snake and the woman and ends with between the race and the snakes, which perhaps symbolizes the breakdown of the relationship between the human race and the animals. The skin garments that God makes for the human race perhaps symbolize the beginning of the exploitation of animals by humans, and are one step before the permission to eat meat that will be given after the flood. The breakdown in the relationship between humanity and the animals is an accident, a result of the sin. This is not the first divine intention. Thus, in the description of the ideal future in Isaiah 11, the corruption will be repaired, and the peace and brotherhood between all creatures will be restored. Now let's move on to the second part of this talk, a panoramic presentation of positive points regarding the attitude towards animals in the entire Bible. And this time it will be only the positive elements. In the framework of the research for the half-full glass in the Bible's attitude towards animals, it is important to emphasize that a positive attitude towards animals emerges from all of the literary types in the Bible. And because our time is short, I will present only a few token examples. In the biblical narrative, Noah was ordered to save all species of animals, regardless of whether they are of benefit to humans or not. After leaving the ark, the Lord makes a covenant also with the animals. And the third point, the Bible puts a sharp reproof in Balaam's female donkey's mouth for having hit her. In contrast to the French philosopher René Descartes, the Bible had no doubt that animals feel pain. And in this exceptional case, it allowed a donkey to express her pain. When we go on to the biblical law, we find some laws that take animals into consideration and protect them, such as the prohibition to block an ox from eating while threshing wheat. This is a revolution because in the laws of the other countries in ancient Near East, there were no rules regarding the protection of animals. I especially like the reason given for the commandment to rest on Shabbat in Exodus 23, so that your ox and your donkey may have relief, and your homeborn slave and the stranger may be refreshed. The animals are referred to here as part of the community. Weak elements similar to the son of the homeborn slave and the stranger, and the law protects the right to a day of rest. From the literature of prophecy, I have already mentioned the vision depicting the end of the days when harmony will prevail between all creatures as described in Isaiah 11. And I will add now the words of the prophet Hosea. And in that day, I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven, and with the creeping things on the ground. In the wisdom books, we find the proper way in which animals should be treated. A righteous man understands the soul of his beast. The photos are from the Freedom Farm, Chavat HaChofesh. I hope everybody knows Chavat HaChofesh in Polish. In addition to recognizing that the animals have a soul, a recognition we have already encountered in the first chapter of Genesis, these words reflect an expectation from the righteous person to know what these living souls' needs are and to fulfill them. What a distance there is between this expectation and what happens today in the era of the modern food industry, which treats animals as a consumer product rather than a living soul. In biblical poetry, there is an expression of a direct connection between animals and God. Animals call to God and he provides them with food. For example, the young lions roar after their prey and seek their food from God. Or, the eyes of all are looking to you. You give them their food at the right time. On the psalmist's expectation of God, man and beast you save, O Lord, Adam uve'emat Hoshia Hashem, says Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in his commentary on the book of Psalms. To man and animal, God wishes to grant a true life full of joy. לאדם ולבהמה רוצה השם להמציא חיים אמיתיים, מלאי אושר. Ask the dairy cows if their lives are full of joy. One of the most significant verses regarding the struggle for ethical treatment of animals is טוב השם לכל ורחמיו על כל מעשיו. The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. In every halachic ruling that is intended to protect animals, one would expect the ruling rabbi to mention this defining verse. In summary, Judaism in general and the Bible in particular present challenges to those who, on the one hand, see themselves as part of the religious community, and I see myself as part of the religious community, but on the other hand, all the vegetarian or even better, vegan ideology. However, Judaism and the Bible, on which I focused in this talk, contain many points of light in the context of the attitude to animals compared to the modern world, which has decreed a nightmarish reality for animals. It is these points of light on which I wish to hold and focus with the intention and hope that what is focused on it will increase, and that more and more opinion leaders among the religious public will emphasize the positive aspects of the Bible and Judaism relating to animals, the way dear Richard does. But the most important thing is not only to talk about the importance of Tzar Baalei Chaim, the prohibition to cause suffering to animals, because everyone can talk. The most important thing is to internalize this message and to live by it, as dear Richard does. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Yael. And with this, we will move to Richard, but I want to see how I can turn the camera in a way that the people on the Zoom will be able to feel it.
גם זום לטובה.
יוסי, יש גם ברכה לריצ'רד שם בצ'אט.
Okay, so I think it's kind of, but people will,
Yeah.
that would be okay. And
Watch the wire.
Where's the wire?
You can, I
Okay.
think you can sit.
Okay, thank you very much, Yossi. Really appreciate.
okay, just a moment, that will not
Okay.
work. They see your, I'll see if I can change the.
Should he sit in the chair?
Can you sit in the chair? Because I think it'll be easier for us if we sit here.
Oh, better sitting.
Yeah, watch the wire.
Okay. Whoops.
Jesse, we'll be able to- You're okay. You can sit.
We have to stand.
Okay.
It's okay if I stand?
Yeah, it's okay, if you stand and,
I can.
I don't know why I cannot turn the camera around.
Okay.
Okay,
There you are.
very good.
Okay, again, I want to really thank Yossi for setting this up. And for years and years, he's been one of the really inspirational people in Israel and the rights movement. And actually, I want to start asking everyone to stand up for a moment of silence in memory of those who lost their lives for the massacre of Hamas on October 7th. And in addition, all who have lost their lives since then, and in the hope that the war will soon be over with Hamas completely devastated and all the hostages coming home safely.
Amen.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, as a bit of a change of pace, I want to indicate why I'm qualified to talk. First of all, I have this special tie, all kinds of fruits on it. But in addition, I have one with all kinds of vegetables on it. And if you're not satisfied, I have a special kippah, and it reminds me I'm a veggie. And as Adam Frank pointed out, Adam Frank, I am wearing Fruit of the Loom underwear. Okay, so I'm really super grateful for the wonderful honors and for God for giving me the opportunity to last this long. So I want to say a special Shekayanu, Bracha Toranoy, Hedema Kolom, Shekayanu, for Kiyamano, for Higiyanu, Osman Hazeh. And I'm super grateful to so many. Wonderful wife here who's been with me for 64 years. It's a great source of advice and inspiration. And I have to thank my two wonderful daughters that are here, Susan Clyde and Deborah.
without them, my wife and I would never be able to make Aliyah, and
Oh,
it
your
made-
son on Zoom.
Hmm?
Your son on Zoom,
Oh,
David.
yeah, okay, sure, just about to say, my son David's not here, but he's coming to Pesach, and he's also being supported, so I want to super thank all my wonderful children on that, and of course, I'm so thankful, Rabbi David Rosen, Rabbi Adam Frank, Madeleine, Yael, and those on the video, amazing, amazing, and really thank everybody for that. Okay, and, okay, I want to dedicate this talk to the wonderful children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, because unless there's a shift to veganism, again, a lot of reasons for that, then there's unfortunately very little chance that they're going to have a decent life. It's a little bit late, I'll try to be relatively brief, but when we go over why climate change is such a tremendous threat and how we respond to it,
Than never. Better late than never.
And I sent it to the Jerusalem Post. They said, if I could find a rabbi who would write an article refuting my position, they would publish both of them. Unfortunately, I couldn't find such a rabbi. I'm just about to shoot for him. There's certainly rabbis who know a heck of a lot more about Judaism, but none of them will really try to refute it. So very briefly, on these 6 mandates, in terms of our health, we all know about Pekuach Nefesh. Out of 613 mitzvot, 610 can be overridden. Only the 3 cardinal sins, murder, idolatry, and let's see.
Incest.
Oh,
Incest, adultery.
adultery, right? Cannot be. And of course, it says, Shematem old enough shall take him. 613 mitzvot. I don't know if any other ones say more old, so very important. And basically, there are many peer-reviewed articles, respected medical journals that point out the health effects of plant-based diets, vegan diets. And so that can make a big difference. Also, you all have suffered, unfortunately, very much from the coronavirus not that long ago. And they have found that many pandemics have been caused by widespread abuse of animals. Just one other quick point on the health. There's so many pesticides used to produce the animal products for the grain and that's being fed to the animals, that people are becoming antibiotic resistant. And of course, that can have very negative effects. In terms of compassion for animals, we are to be, according to the Talmud, Rachmanim b'nei Rachmanim, and imitating a God whose compassion is over all his works, as Yael so beautifully said, from Ashrei, Psalms 145:9, recited 3 times a day in the synagogues. So that can make tremendous difference, very strong teachings. Says every day in the daily prayers, Baruch Hashem al haaretz, Baruch Hashem al habriyot. So that very strong teaching. On the other hand, just to give a couple of quick examples, dairy cows are artificially impregnated every single year so they can constantly get milk. And then, and by the way, the industry calls that rape racks. And then, of course, when they give birth, their calves are taken away almost immediately. So that milk, which is meant for the baby cows, and even Cook calls it a theft when it's not, then it's taken away so it can be sold for profit. Egg-laying hens, because the males can't produce milk, they haven't been genetically programmed to be able to have much flesh, so they are killed almost immediately after birth, put into plastic bags where they suffocate or are killed by pressure of those above them. And the egg-laying hens, they are put in cages so small they can't even raise one wing. And because of that, all their pecking order is disturbed. They peck at each other, could harm each other. Instead of giving them more space, what they do is they debeak the birds, no anesthetic, very painful process, equivalent to cutting off our hands. Okay, in terms of the environment, you already spoke about climate change, other negative effects, but there's 80 billion farmed animals slaughtered every single year. And very other environmental effects. We talk about deforestation, soil erosion, pollution from the waste products. Coral reefs are being bleached or destroyed. Okay, in terms of conservation of resources, we all know Baal Tashchit indicates in Deuteronomy chapter 20 that even in wartime, when you might think anything goes, they're not permitted to destroy fruit-bearing trees, to build a battering ram to try to overcome an enemy fortification. But animal-based are very wasteful, require far more land, far more energy, far more water. As a matter of fact, it could be up to as much as 13 times as much water. And so these are all mandates, very important Jewish values, and the realities are far from the Jewish teachings. In terms of helping the hungry, At a time when an estimated 9 billion people are dying of hunger and its effects, up to 10% of the world's people are chronically malnourished, 70% of the grain in the US fed to animals destined for slaughter. And what really makes it even more shameful is that we take very healthy foods, corn and oats and soy, for example, very high in fiber, complex carbohydrates, feed them to animals, and we get beaten up products with exactly the other characteristics. Okay, and the last is to seek peace and pursue it, Bakhe Shalom B'Rat Fehu. And here, might find a little bit harder to make the connection, but our sages saw that the words lechem and milchama come from the same root. From that, they deduced when there's a shortage of grain and other resources, people are more likely to go to war. And unfortunately, history has borne that out. Battles over water in biblical days, now more in terms of petroleum. So, bottom line, we're heading toward a climate catastrophe, heating up. We see it all the time in reports about the flooding and wildfires. And many things have to be done as well. Okay, so I want to conclude. We indicated that no gifts expected. One gift is to be involved, in spreading the word, because if for the world's future generation, it's essential that that happens. And by the way, I have a letter coming out tomorrow's Jerusalem Post that will be stressing this. So again, I want to thank all of you for coming, and also for all the compliments and support. Really appreciate it, and Kotu, and all the best.
And we will conclude this evening with a greeting from Rabbi Yonatan Merrill. And I think, again, we had so many speakers, but מגלמים בעברית את הלימוד ואת I'll move to Hebrew for a minute. היו לנו באמת דוברים שממש מגלמים בצורה מושלמת את הלימוד ואת המורשת שריצ'רד ממשיך להפיץ באימיילים יומיומיים, ויונתן מרל, אני חושב, דרך מעולה לסיים את הערב הזה. אולי בואו תבואו לך.
Richard asked me to speak for 2 minutes, so I will try to keep it at that. I grew up in California near going to, sometime when I was a kid, a retirement community in the 1980s, where I was introduced to this concept that when somebody reaches the age of 60 or 65, they move to a retirement community and they get involved in lawn bowling, golf, pinochle, and craps. And as Rabbi Rosen said a few minutes ago, Richard is an example of a very different reality. Dynamic, active, now entering his 10th decade. I read an article recently, Richard mentioned about methane, that the methane released by cows being 80 times stronger than carbon dioxide and causing global warming. Well, scientists are now also talking about nitrous oxide, which is 300 times stronger than carbon dioxide, and which is also a product of industrial agriculture, much of which goes to feed animal agriculture, and the putting of 80 billion animals in factory farms on Earth in order to feed people's desire for meat.
80 billion a year.
80 billion a year, and actually that's just 80 billion at any one time. If you actually look at the number of animals that live each year for that are cycled through, it's actually hundreds of billions, if not more than 1 trillion. the last thing I want to say is I believe that, when each of us reaches the end of our life and we go upstairs and we meet our maker, that the Ribono Shel Olam, the master of the world, is going to ask us, did you do everything you could when everything is at stake? Because this is the bottom of the ninth for those who follow baseball. This is it. And there is a societal suppression of talking about the ecological crisis, which is actually a spiritual crisis. And you are one of the few people, and especially one of the few people your age, because younger people are willing to talk about it. But you are one of the few people who is willing to stand up and say, we need to focus on this. This is the most important thing. As Rabbi Rosen says, everything else is like rearranging deck chairs on the ship Titanic. And so I just want to bless you as you enter your 10th decade on earth, that you and everyone gathered here and all of humanity should help the next generation and the current generation inherit a thriving, spiritually aware, and sustainable planet. Happy birthday.
Thank you. You're welcome to sit with us, talk around. The place is not closing down. Happy birthday. Thank you.
Many, many thanks again.